Today, we're talking about the secret files of Section D. This setting promises secret agents, super science, and supernatural elements, all set against the backdrop of World War II. Now, the secret files of Section D is a setting book for the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition system to create a pulp action adventures in the late 1930s. The game focuses on the agents of Section D, a secret branch of the British Secret Intelligence Service that deals with supernatural and paranormal threats. The game combines historical accuracy with fantastical elements such as Nazi pseudoscience, alien visitors, ancient mysteries, and more. Now, before we dive into the contents of the book, I want to talk about the book itself. Now, in addition to the physical copy of the book, the author also sent me a PDF ahead of time. Reading through the PDF, I didn't care for the layout as much, but once I got my hands on the book, I realized that it looks a lot better in print. And the physical book feels great. It's got a nice finish to it. The art, the way it comes out on the sides and the back, looks great. The inside, the layout comes across very well, has some quality paper, and best of all, it has a ribbon. The way this book is divided makes it clear at the beginning of each chapter what is okay for player eyes and what is meant for GM eyes only. Additionally, since the game takes place in the real world, it's also clear throughout the book and in the layout what is actually real, what happened in the real world at that time, and what is made up and fictitious. Throughout the book, you see these old-timey photos from different eras and even some that look old-timey but are clearly fake. I really enjoyed these photos as it kind of added to the element of it being a historic book. Now, there is some additional art in the book that I didn't care for. That's this sort of cartoony watercolor feel to it, and it definitely adds to the flavor the author's going for, but it's just not for me. I also wish that the dimensions of the book would have matched other Savage Worlds books, but I'm guessing that this format is more typical for RPG books as it looks close to the dimensions of my D&D books. But that's enough about the physical book. Let's talk about what's inside and the details of the setting. The first thing is setting rules. Any good setting has good setting rules, and this setting has a lot of them. The book starts with the setting rules that are used from the core Savage Worlds rulebook, as well as some modified rules, but it also adds several additional setting rules to the game. Specifically, we have 9 new setting rules in this book. Some of these new setting rules I like, some I don't think are actually setting rules, and some I think are just more complicated than I want them to be for what's supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek campaign. On top of that, I also think there may be too many setting rules, but then again, some examples of settings in the Fantasy Companion have even more setting rules. So I'm just not really sure the setting needs it, but I guess it's not out of the ordinary. I'm not gonna call out every single setting rule that's in this book, but here are some of the bigger ones. One of the setting rules is a hero in waiting, meaning that characters start with 4 advances. This is one of those setting rules I'm not really sure I would call a setting rule, but I get the idea. The game wants the characters to start out somewhat skilled, so the setting rule makes sense. This means they completely skip the novice rank. That being said, I really like the idea of playing new recruits who are completely out of their depths and have to figure out what's going on in this new world with monsters and magic. The other setting rule that might actually seem a little bit familiar to people who are familiar with Savage Worlds is the Blaze of Glory setting rule. This setting rule allows your character to make some amazing feats before they die. And it's similar to the Blaze of Glory rules in the Superpowers Companion, but the ones in this book seem more intense and epic, and overall, when I compare the two, I decided I actually like the ones in this book more than I like the ones in the Superpowers Companion. There's also a new setting rule for demolitions. With this setting rule also comes new expanded rules for demolitions as well as new edges. For example, there are expanded rules on explosions and the use of different types of fuses, explosive types, etc. I actually really enjoyed reading through these rules. They make sense and add a lot of realism around explosives. However, this seems almost too realistic and complicated for a game that, again, is supposed to be tongue-in-cheek. On the other hand, the cliffhanger setting rules seem like they are a lot of fun and it would add a lot to the tongue-in-cheek pulp style that this game is going for. Cliffhangers in the secret files of Section D are setbacks that advance the story and ultimately reward the agents. Think of it like those cartoon shows where at the end of the episode, someone's dangling off the side of a cliff and you don't know what's going to happen.
We find Cliffhanger where we left him last, hanging from a cliff.
But then at the very beginning of the next episode, everyone's fine. Now, these cliffhanger rules actually cover a whole entire page, so they do go quite in depth. On top of these new setting rules, there's also new character options that are quite fun as well. Both the new hindrances and edges are fun and unique. Now, when it comes to hindrances, I've always put most hindrances into one of 2 categories. There are the roleplay hindrances and the mechanical hindrances. Now, you can obviously roleplay just about any hindrance, but roleplay hindrances, in my mind, tend not to have a mechanical effect built into them. In the secret files of Section D, there seems to be a good mix of both kinds. For the edges, there is a good variety of different background, combat, social, and professional edges. One of my favorite edges is the sniper edge, which adds a new mechanic called Overwatch. This allows characters with this edge to be able to take shots without having to roll to interrupt. Moving on to gear, there is a lot of gear options in this book, from normal gear from the era and plenty of guns to choose from. And I mean a lot of guns. There are pages and pages of guns, as well as other weapons and devices from the Q Lab. Again, however, the number of guns and other gear in the book seems like a bit much for a game that's trying to be tongue-in-cheek. Within the gear section, there are rules for concealment. Spies and agents are often hiding things on their person, and some are easier to hide than others. A lot of the gear and weapons have what's called a concealment rating. The concealment rating is a modifier that's applied to the thievery roll to hide the item on your person. The modifier is also used on the notice roll of whoever is trying to spot the item. One of the things I thought was a little unclear is when you need to roll thievery versus when you had to roll notice. I also didn't particularly care for the way that the concealment rating worked for notice. If the GM is running enemies who are trying to notice things, there's a lot they have to roll and do math for in order to figure out what weapons or items are seen on the opposing characters. I almost would have rather have seen this system be some sort of target number, at least for the notice rolls, but I'm not sure how you would do both. From here, the book goes over the details of what's going on in the world, both what actually happened and what's kind of made up. It gives a rundown of what the characters can and should know, and then has a separate section for details that players may know with their game master's permission. From here, it moves on to the GM tools and generators. This section has a whole slew of different tables and generators for NPCs, villains, master villains, a section for a bunch of other different kinds of villains. It has a list of villainous abilities you can add to your villains, has a layer generator, has a description of how underlings should work as well as henchmen. It has a section of equipment that's specifically for villains. Although I will say that the equipment section really could have been like any cool gadget that maybe could have been put in with the Q section, but I get it. Some of these are probably pretty evil. After that section of wonderful generators and different villain abilities, it moves into the campaign styles. The Secret Files of Section D is a game that offers a lot of flexibility and variety as it allows you to choose from 3 different campaign styles, each with its own tone and flavor. The first campaign style is Pulp. This is the most fantastical and adventurous style, where you can create incredible heroes with outrageous abilities and have them foil the world-shattering plots of maniacal villains. This style is inspired by fictional characters like Indiana Jones and Lara Croft who are going out on adventures retrieving magical artifacts. In a Pulp campaign, you can travel to different locations around the world and face all kinds of enemies, from Nazis to aliens, from sinister business people to madcap scientists. In a Pulp campaign, pretty much anything is possible, and the game encourages you to be creative and have fun with it. This is really the style I think the author is going for when he talks about being a tongue-in-cheek game, as well as maybe the second style, which is espionage. This is the more glamorous and cinematic style, where you play as spies who operate in neutral countries, gathering intelligence and secrets while avoiding detection and danger. This style is influenced by movies like Casablanca and The Third Man, where spies wage a clandestine war against a backdrop of high society and far from the guns of battle. In an espionage campaign, you will need to use your stealth and charm, as well as your gadgets and contacts to complete your mission and stay alive. It's a high-stakes game, played for keeps, and you never know who you can trust. The third campaign style is military. This is the most realistic and gritty style, where you play as saboteurs and guerrillas who wage a covert war against the enemy using propaganda, resistance, and sabotage. This style is based on the historical operations of Section D, who were formed to take war to the enemy in the form of building resistance and intelligence networks, the creation and distribution of propaganda, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. In a military campaign, you will need to deal with a lot of tension and role-playing as you try to blend in with the locals, recruit allies, and avoid capture. It's a sandbox-style campaign in a localized area with lots of details. Some groups might not like this game style, and the game warns you about the realities of war and the potential harm it can cause. It is this game style I think that the author had in mind when listing all the details for different things like the explosions and all the different kind of weapons and gear you can have. You can choose the campaign style that suits your preference and taste, or even mix and match elements from different styles to create your own unique version of Section D. The book gives you a lot of guidance and advice on how to run each style, and even provides adventure generators to create mission details and plot seeds for each one. Now, the book's final section contains notes for game masters about different enemies, types of enemies, and all the stat blocks for them. This is another section that showcases a very high level of detail. Every country in this section has its own special abilities for their soldiers, but it also includes other mysterious creatures as well, with aliens, monsters, as well as cults. The Secret Files of Section D brings a compelling mix of pulp action and supernatural intrigue to Savage Worlds system. Hello, Future Goose here. I realized as I was editing there was a bunch of stuff I forgot to say, so here it goes. If the Secret Files of Section D sounds like a setting you're interested in, but you want to give it a shot before buying, you can get a taster version on DriveThruRPG. You can download it for free or pay what you want to support the creator. This taster edition includes a complete introduction to Section D and its history, examples of new edges and hindrances created to bring your agent to life, examples of the weapons and gear of Section D, pre-generated characters, and a full Savage Tale, Trouble in Tripoli, including maps and the deck plans for a giant airship. Suppose you are like me and primarily run pre-written campaigns and adventures. In that case, there is an entirely written adventure called Better Latte Than Never, which takes place in the city of Prague, where the agents must extract a professor of antiquities and get their hands on the fabled elixir of the Aztec god Huanacupate. before the Nazis. If this game sounds fun, you can grab the PDF on DriveThruRPG or the physical version from the Imaginarium Games website. Overall, The Secret Files of Section D is a well-crafted setting for Savage Worlds, offering a unique and engaging spin on historical fantasy. Your enjoyment of the book may hinge on personal preferences and your thoughts on historical fiction, but the richness of the setting and the wealth of options makes it a commendable addition to any Savage Worlds collection. And that's my thoughts on The Secret Files of Section D. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below, and let me also know what are your favorite settings for Savage Worlds. Until next time, stay savage.